So good afternoon. I'm here with Mr. Joshua Langstaff from the Maverick Motors channel. Say hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. Very good. I'm not sure that many of you are aware of Maverick Motors. Josh's channel's, growing, but it's only started quite recently, sort of in earnest. And I know that a lot of you like things like Rover content, MG content, British Leyland content, that sort of stuff. And Maverick Motors is a channel that's focused sort of, I would say, more around that kind of stuff. Even if I put a Rover on the thumbnail on my video, if it's only very loosely related, I tend to get more views, which is interesting. So there we are. But you've had quite a few cars in your time, haven't you? I mean, how many have you driving?
Too many for a 21-year-old.
So you've been driving about 4 years?
I've been driving since I think it was July 2017. I passed my test on February, and I wasn't driving for about 6 months. So I've been driving since July 17. So coming on 4 years, yeah. And I've had 7 or 8.
By the time I was 21, I only had 2 cars, and one of them wasn't even really mine. So that's pretty impressive to have had so many.
Well, I had one before I even started driving, which I never technically driven. But
which one was that?
That was, I owned it was Mark 3.5, 3.5 Ford Fiesta Classic Quartz.
You never drove
essentially,
that?
Pardon?
You never drove that one?
Not on the road, no.
Oh, okay.
I did drive it. We don't have private land, but my grandparents, she lives up like a private drive. It's only a small one, but I used to drive it around there.
Great.
And but that car, essentially, I was looking at getting a Mark 6 Fiesta, the 2002 to 2008 one. Yes, I think it's Mark 6 or maybe Mark 4.
Yeah, had one of those on my channel recently, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was looking at getting one of them from a distant relative. And, I've always been into classic cars. And I was just wandering through a local town on my lunch break while I was at college. And I saw this Mark III Fiesta. I thought, I've always wanted one of them. So I actually just went up and asked if I could have a sit in it. And she says, do you want to buy it for 250 quid? I thought, I'll rip your hand off.
Did it actually work?
Yeah, it was full. When I bought it, it was fully MOT'd. It did have a bit of a crusty rear arch on one of the sides. I can't remember particularly which one.
As we found out one of the live streams recently, every car on that platform, and there are a lot of them on that platform, they all do that.
Yeah. And as well as that, the brake lines, I think, maybe would have needed attention. It was an advisory on the previous MOT. But what happened was I got to a point where I'd left college to go in the Royal Air Force, which I didn't do in the end, and I needed a car to get to my then job. And I thought, to save time and save money, even though it would have worked out at the same price in hindsight, I was going to I part exchanged it essentially for a Ford Ka, which was in some ways the best decision, because I ended up crashing the Ford Ka, and I would have hated it if I crashed the Fiesta. But in other senses, the worst decision, because the Fiesta got scrapped and it had 31,000 miles on it, and I absolutely adored that car. Was
that because the Fiesta was just sitting there not being used?
It was because it needed work doing, and I needed something right there and then. I needed, it needed a fair bit doing to it. I think it would have needed the whole rear arches welding if I was to get it through an MOT again and things like that. So it's a shame, because it was a lovely car and I have very fond memories of it.
It's just a shame, something like that. I mean, it would have cost the same amount of money as you paid for it to do all that work, wouldn't it? It would have cost the same again.
Yeah, that's what I was meaning. Yeah. It's silly 18-year-old me didn't realise that I could have just, taken it to a local garage and spent £400 on it, and it would have, it might have looked a bit rough, but it'd be through an MOT, which is, how much I spent on buying the terrible Ka.
Did you have a rusty fuel filler cap on your Ka?
No, actually.
How? That's impossible. That's impossible. They all do that.
They do all do that, and mine was I've completely forgot about that until you've mentioned it. But yeah, no, my cat didn't have. Actually, it was fairly rust free until I had the crash and saw the front crash member.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
At least and that had an MOT, did it, that one?
Yeah, I bought that with an MOT from quite a dodgy place that wasn't very willing to give me a receipt. And
I think
it
Mr.
was
Coltman's uncle would have taken that off the road immediately with like that. He would have taken that
probably
condemned it.
But it was all right. I mean, I drove it for 6 months, and I did probably roughly 2,000 miles in a month at that time.
Okay,
I was doing a lot of mileage.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it bodywork wise, it wasn't too bad. The bumpers were fairly faded, as they do, but rust wise, it was quite clean. But it's quite funny actually. I got to a point where I had a friend who gave me a load of almost brand new Mark 1 KA interior bits, and so I swapped them out on mine because they were the same color. But mine was a 2004, so these had come out of a 2008, so they were as new. And I spent that weekend putting the interior in, and I used a heat gun to get the bumpers back to black, or at least half of them. And then 2 days later, I binned it in the back of this Mini. And that was when I found out that the bumper essentially dislodged itself off the front of the car, and the frontage of the crash member had just rusted in the middle and on all the anchorage points and just bent in on itself. And I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but where the VIN plate is on the front of a car, usually where your
slam panel.
That's the one, yeah, where the bonnet latch is.
Mm-hmm. Slam panel,
yeah. And that had twisted like a cheese straw. It completely twisted. And then I got it on the recovery truck. It turns out the front springs were also sheared in half, and they were rusty, which means that they'd sheared in half long before that I had the crash. Probably.
I don't think that car would have actually come off the ramp at Mr. Coleman's uncle's garage. It would have just been sort of sliced up on the ramp.
No, I don't either. It was a terrible car, to be honest. I have some memories of it, but I was glad to be rid of it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
but as an 18-year-old, you don't check over cars properly. You just buy them and get them on the road because it's a car, and lessons learned.
Yeah, it's like that Dolomite that I owned when I think I was 22 when I had it. Yeah, that's a story that I've recounted on my channel back in November. That was interesting. Yeah, that thing was lethal because it had no brake servo anymore. I didn't realise, and
all the brakes lock up.
I went for a drive with one headlight at night. The first time I got back, I was so excited because the car arrived on a truck down from Scotland. I bought it sight unseen from Scotland. I was so stupid, His first job, I'd actually was earning money, and it's like I need to buy myself a Dolomite because I've been watching the professionals, and so I need one. I need a Dolomite, so I got one, and it arrived, and the brake servo had failed in the way that one of the hoses had split. And so there was just no brake servo at all. So I got in it and I sort of drove off with one headlight and didn't realize the brakes were rubbish. And I got to like a hill. It's like, why aren't the brakes working? And I go down this hill, and I just thought, okay, there's something wrong. It was like stamping my foot really hard, and the car stopped. And only when I sort of got back, the next day, I rang up the RAC and said, there's a problem with my brakes. So he came along and he just cut the hose because it tended to perish at one end rather than the middle. So he just cut the hose down the side and put it back on. I think it was 2 Jubilee clips I've done on either end of the hose, and that was it. It was fine. Problem solved. One of the things.
Simple enough on older cars, isn't it?
Yeah, a Dolomite is like Stone Age technology in one of those. So it's quite I replaced the battery myself with no problems because it's only held on with 2 wing nuts.
Yeah. Well, that was the same with my Fiesta. It's just 2 slight battery clamps, and that was it.
Yeah, but 2 wing nuts, straight out, and that was fine. But yeah, I could have easily been killed. It had this one of these wooden steering.
Which isn't always the best, really, is it, Mr.
No,
Lloyd?
no, not really. And it had this wooden steering wheel on it, aftermarket one with metal spokes. And so if I'd crashed into something, I probably would have died. It would have impaled into my face. It's amazing what you do when you're kind of quite young and you sort of think it's going to be really interesting to have a sort of old car, and then the old car almost kills you.
Yeah, I've had that several times. Once I crashed the car, I had about, I was working about 14 miles from home. So I ended up, so I needed another car. I mean, anywhere that I work is at least 14 miles from my house because I'm in a small village in the middle of nowhere. But I needed a car very quickly. So I had a budget of around £500 to £1,000. And I thought, I just want to get something that I actually quite like. And I've been looking at British cars for ages. So
of course,
I was looking at a Rover 25 because of the image and because of my crash. The insurance prices were actually really good on them because of Grandad car. So
yeah, it's bizarre. The 45 V6 that I have is actually cheaper to insure than the MG3 was.
Yeah, well, we can get onto that in a bit if you know what I mean. But yes, so I went to York where I found this fairly tatty but Sienna Gold Rover 25. And it wasn't bad. The heater switch was broken, so you had to turn it with a pair of pliers.
Yeah, the R8 and R3 and 25 and ZR heating module, there's often problems with those.
Yeah, always. And it didn't work on 1 and 2, obviously. But it hadn't been run on the road in 6 months. It still had an MOT. But it was, it's a fairly decent car actually. And I'd only had the crash like half a week ago. And I was panicking on the way home, all the way going down on the dual carriages. Like, oh God! But no, that car was brilliant, and that cost me 140 quid, and it was the best 140 pounds I'd ever spent.
I had a Sienna Gold 25 as well, as I think I've told you. It was a 2003 1.4 IS. I think it'd done 95,000 miles. I bought it as a Santa Pod car. And the main problem for me with the R3s and 25s is they're just not comfortable enough for me. I find I get cramped quite easily, and the cable clutch in them is a total nightmare unless you adjust them properly. And even on the later ones with the Ford gearboxes, like the one I had was, still, like the clutches aren't great. I mean, the earlier ones, the R65 gearbox in them, which are the 1.1, 1.1.4, 1.6 ones. The gearboxes start off pretty good, and then later on they get all floppy and horrible.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Ford ones. So they can be a bit challenging to drive in that respect. And I get cramp after half an hour in one of those, which is one of the reasons I haven't had another one. But when you actually drive them a short distance or something like that, they actually handle really, really well. Even the standard ones do.
They did handle very well. I mean, I've got several situations where I was in a precarious sort of state. I used to do sort of taxi runs for, I've got some local neighbours who we always used to do like house parties and stuff pre-COVID. And
yes, pre-COVID, yes. I remember those days, yes.
Yes, don't we all? Yes. Reminiscing, nostalgia. But yeah, I used to do taxi runs for them. So if they were ever on a night out in a local village, they'd rather give me the money. So I'd go and pick them up and take them home. And there's a road near my grandparents' house where they were. And imagine like a constant test speed bumps, just like smooth speed bumps. I remember them all pissed out of their minds, sat in the back of my car going, this is quite nice, isn't it?
It'd be sick.
But no, I'll tell you what, that 25 was really good in snow as well. When we had the Beast from the East, I had 3 occasions. One where I was in North Yorkshire and it did perfectly fine on the North Yorkshire moors. Once when I was at work and we got a blizzard where I could see no further than like a meter in front of the car, it did absolutely fine. And then when the Beast from the East first hit, I was in York. And if anybody knows York very well, the Grimston Bar park and ride is on a hill, so it's on quite a large slope with traffic lights right at the bottom of the slope, and you go down it, and in the snow we got to the end sort of sideways like that. I'm thinking, why aren't the traffic lights turning green? And the sensor had been covered in snow, so I had to try and get back up it to then go down the other exit. And it handled it fine.
It's really
It was a fairly competent car.
It's really strange with everybody driving, you know, big heavy cars now with all sorts of electronic aids in them. How much worse they are in handling snow than something like an old Rover 25. Because the tyres on those are quite skinny. If someone, and ZR not so much, but the 25s are quite skinny tyres, the standard ones. And, you know, a manual gearbox and a car that probably weighs less than a ton. I mean, that's what you want in a snow. It's exactly what you want. You don't want to.
Yeah, you want something, you know, as light as you can. It's hence why Reliant Robins and Rialtos do so well in snow, is because they're just so light. They just glide over it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I paid 400 for the one I had, and I sold it for the same money a few months later after we finished our Santa Poda at the time. And you know, it wasn't bad. All the heater speeds worked. It had just had an MOT. The problem is I sold it. A year later I came back and looked at it still on the road, and I think something must have happened to it. The head gasket on when I drove it was fine. It was actually quite powerful because you can if you do the head gaskets right on the case and you need to change them, you can make 20 extra horsepower from just using the right set and having somebody who knows what they're doing, like Mr. Coleman, who's done hundreds of them. You can just add horsepower just by doing it properly and putting the right set on. People don't realise that. They just think that case series engines are a pile of rubbish, which actually it's mainly due to poor maintenance and not changing the oil and, you know, neglecting cam belt
oil and coolant. It's just a case of keep on top of them, and it tends to look after itself, really.
Yeah.
But it's general stuff that you should take with any car, really. I mean, I've had 3 Rovers, but by that I mean I've had 3 MG Rover cars, so all with that sort of thing. Now, 2 of them did have K series, one of them being the 25, and the other one being my ZR, which I got given to replace the 25.
Why did you get given that then?
Essentially, one of the guys who I used to do the taxi runs for, his mum used to own it, and she didn't like it, so it sat as his unit.
Why didn't she like it?
I've never asked.
maybe it was this driving position thing and the cable clutch, which, you know, you could adjust to make it a bit better, because they are a bit tricky to drive if you're not used to it. But it could be that.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it was quite a tatty example, but I think she ended up getting a modern car or something. But essentially, it had been at his unit for about 2 years, I think, and it was a ZR 104 Atomics, which is quite a rare edition.
Yeah.
And it was filthy. It was covered in hay, and it took a lot of detailing. When I first got it, I couldn't see the fact that it was Atomics, because even though the car was green, it had been sat outside and inside and with algae and mildew all over algae. What am I thinking of? But you know what I mean, the greenery all over it, that the badges had been covered. But I did it all up and cleaned it, and all it needed was a idle air control valve off the 25, and it went straight through an MOT. It was absolutely fine. I drove it to Bradford Longbridge the next week.
You took parts of a 25 to put in your ZR?
Yes.
What happened to your 25 then? Was it in a bad state or something?
The 25 is one of those cars that another one that I sort of think I should have kept. I'm glad I got rid of it, because I wouldn't have got the other cars that I've had. But as much as the way with 25s, 200s, R8s, R3s, the rear boot hinges had completely rotten through. You could actually see the bottom sheet of metal on the roof and poke through and actually touch it. Now, I could have got them welded. The rest of the car was absolutely fine, and I probably should have got them welded, because there was still bare metal to weld too. But I thought I'd been given the ZR, I may as well have a bit of fun as well. So I sold on the 25, and it's still owned and still used.
Oh, you actually sold it? Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't scrap it. I sold it for a very, very low price. I sold it for £100 to a young lad
Fair enough.
who
That's
was
30,
wanting.
£40 appreciation. That's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad at all.
No.
And I sold it to a young lad who was wanting a car to cut his teeth on, and I thought, you know what, for £100, I'm losing 40 quid. I don't mind, and I'd rather him learn something, and he still uses it to this day,
Yeah,
as far as I know.
it's funny, the 200 R3 that I drove on No Budget Reviews last year that belongs to Jude Curry. That one, it's a really early one. It's a 1996. I put 95 in the video, but it's actually in 96. I made a better life afterwards. That is a really early one. In fact, it's still got the paisley interior, and it's still got manual windows. It's an SI, and Jude had paid £100 for it. And the interior is a bit ropey. The paint was just flaking and things, particularly the lacquer. But 100 quid, it's unbelievable what you can pick up for 100 quid, isn't it? Crazy.
It is absolutely extremely unbelievable. I'm currently on in the works of an article at the moment on how far young drivers can go on such little money. And it's funny because young drivers always seem to put image first. A lot of them say, like, oh, I want a Corsa or a Fiesta, because that's typically what you'd get.
Do they really have enough of an image of Fiesta and a Corsa? Because I just think about them as quite sort of vanilla cars. My former housemate had Corsa C for many, many years, and with the famous trip to Norwich we took in that in 2011, and they're very vanilla cars to me. They're fine, but I don't see them as having a better image than most other stuff. Is that really?
I do agree with you. They are very typical white goods cars.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to get across is, for a lot of people, they're the typical image of what they would go for. Okay. So you'd get a Fiesta or a Corsa because you can do them up, and that's what everybody likes to do up, like a Corsa C, for example.
Yeah. I mean, but back in my day, it was the Novas. I mean, like the modifications.
Yeah, exactly.
The you'd make on a Nova is ridiculous. I mean, less so now because there's hardly any left. But you shove a red top engine in there and things like that, and crazy modified Novas. I mean, it was Saxos, and obviously now it's Corsas. But it's just interesting that you sort of, you don't buy one of those, that you can actually get yourself something really, really interesting.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, for £140, I got something that was interesting. It drove nicely. It was fairly fun if you wanted it to be, and as well as that, it saved me about half on insurance, which is ridiculous. And I've done I'm doing exactly the same again when I replace the MG3. It's stupid.
We'll get onto that a little bit later. But
definitely.
So the ZR that you had, what sort of mileage was on that after you sort of pulled it out under the hay and the moss and everything?
Both 93,000 and 118,000 is ringing a bell. I would have said it's 118 because it was fairly rusty, and it was just a bit careworn.
It's just, of course, but so you've still only got the sort of more basic 1.4 in one of those. What was your 25 or I call it 103 horsepower. I know some people call it 102, 105, something like that. I call it 103. I don't know why, because back in the day the magazine used to say it was 103. Was that the same engine that you had in the 25 as well? So I know
yes.
I know if you have a 103. Yeah, mine was a 103 too, and then the R3 that I had was a 103. So I know them pretty well, and the 45 I had was a 103. So I don't know. I always had that engine and that fire output. You notice anything?
Yeah, they were both essentially the same car underneath. It's just the ZR was a bit sportier, and it felt probably a bit tighter.
Yeah.
But just underneath they were essentially the same.
Yeah, they are. It's just literally some badges over, and the suspension is a bit different, and the wheels are
£15 voucher from Halfords, nice body kit.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a very successful thing MG Rover did at the time, because the image of BMG ZR the 25 was so different, and yet they're pretty much identical. It's really strange how that worked. And same thing with the 75 and the ZT. The ZTs are much more valuable now than 75s, but they're virtually the same. I find that an interesting thing that they did. It didn't save the company or anything, but it was an interesting marketing thing anyway.
Yeah. It's very clever what you can do with, a spanner set and a bit of design and a bit of marketing, really.
Yeah. So how long did you have that MGZR?
I had that, if I remember rightly, I had it for roughly 4 months. I might have had it a bit longer. I know I drove it for about 4 months until the head gasket went, which is
Of course,
typical.
because
Of course, being sat for
sat for 2 years.
Yeah. I did change it. I mean, it had been sat for 2 years. The oil, when I got it, according to the mileage that was on the front of it, was written on the engine cover, was the previous oil change was 16,000 miles ago. So, it was past it, to say the least. But yeah, I had that for about 4 months, and the head gasket went. So I drove it for about 2 weeks, I think. It was about a fortnight. At the beginning of the fortnight, I knew the head gasket was going. And so I went out and I was like, oh no, what do I do? What do I do? So I panic bought, without checking it properly over, my first proper classic car, a 1990 H-Reg Rover Metro, which, they're renowned for being rust-free, aren't they? So
oh yeah, no Rover Metros ever had any corrosion at any time in history.
No, made of Sheffield steel. They're built out of
yes,
they're just
Sheffield steel. My grandfather was a foreman at Jessup Savile in Sheffield, so the finest quality steel that there's ever.
Finest quality steel in Sheffield.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But no, that I should have checked over. Essentially, I took it for its MOT because I bought it without one. And
it's another thing you do, isn't it? You buy without an MOT. It's all gonna be fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. So I took it to my place of work, because I was working. I wasn't in jewelry at the time. I was in the motor trade, and the MOT tester there, he just said to me, "Josh, have you actually looked this over?" And I said, "Yeah, why? The sills seem fine." And he's just straight through the whole thing. Pardon?
Screwdrivers going through the floor, was it? It was screwdrivers.
Yeah, the majority of the side panels of the floor, but the worst one was on the driver's side sill, and they put an oversill on it, and it had rotted from the inside out.
Oh, fantastic! It's just like a Jaguar X-Type. That's what they do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, the subframe was absolutely rock solid, which is a miracle on a Metro. So yeah, that I actually kept that. I was going to do it up, and then I eventually sold it on to one of my colleagues there. But
you didn't actually drive it on the road though, because it wouldn't go through the MOT with a floor that didn't exist.
Well, I did, because it was insured, and I technically could, because I could take it home. The floor was bad enough that you could drive it, but it wasn't so bad that it could pass a test. But yeah, I got it back home, and it probably rusting in a field somewhere now. But
unless Mr. Westby's taken it to parts and put it on his one or something.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, Ed would love that, actually, because it was a 1.1C as well, so it would have had all the parts that he needed.
I am just completely opposite when it comes to the cars. I like whatever it is. I buy the top version. So the cars we have, the SsangYong, that's the top version. It's called the Ultimate, which is a great name for a car. And then the road we have is the Connoisseur. If I had to have a Rover Metro, it would be I think it was the
1.4 GSI.
1.4. No, it was the GS originally, not GSI. And an optional leather interior, because it wasn't standard. There was an SL. The Metro had so many trim levels. It's unbelievable. I think it had 8 or something stupid. And the SL and GS were quite close, but the GS was the optional leather. Of course, you find me a nice dark green or dark blue GS with a beige leather interior, I'll be a happy man for the rest of my life.
Yes. I almost, for my first ever car, I almost bought a Rover 100. I was looking at 2, and one of them was I'll tell you what, it was an ex-showroom dealer car with 8,000 miles on it. And it was in I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's like Tahiti blue, but lighter.
Yeah,
It's
and
hard to
I know.
describe.
I can't remember the
I
the
can't think of the
colour,
name of
but
it because
I
it's
know the
quite
one
a
you
rare
mean.
one. They
Yeah,
did a lot of 200 R3s in them.
yeah, I know the one.
But anyway, and that had all the body kits on it, so all the dealer options barring leather. That was really nice. But then I almost bought a Rover 100 with a beige leather interior. Seems to ring a bell.
It'd be a GSI if it was a beige leather interior. It would be a GSI.
But that was really nice as well.
Why,
I
why,
tend to
why
try
didn't you
and go
buy
for
it?
the nice ones now.
Why didn't you buy those?
That was while I was still learning to drive, and I hadn't
Oh,
really gotten the money together yet. Especially the
okay.
one with 8,000 miles was about £1,000, which was at the time way out of my budget.
That's pretty
Uh,
strong money, I think, even today for a Rover 100, isn't it? They're not the most
for
expensive.
100, yes, yeah,
Yeah, I know the earlier metros like one Mr. Westby has. They've actually got some value now, but the hundreds are not very expensive unless you look at the one that Mr. Richardson drove on Furious Driving. That was a bit of strong money. That one, but that was perfect. That car, of
yeah.
course,
It was very, very immaculate, that little red one.
It was from KGF, and so their cars are always perfect. You just have to
Oh,
pay
I know.
you have to pay quite a lot of money for the privilege to have a perfect car from KGF.
Yeah, well, at least people pay for them so we can watch the videos on YouTube, because I spend hours just going. If I ever want a car and I want to see like really high def videos of it, I just go on KGF and see if I can find a video of this.
Yeah, the thing is, it's exactly as you say. I mean, you know, they are pretty expensive, but the ones they have are the best condition ones you'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite my thing I would do, but if you want to see what a showroom condition, whatever example of it is, then you just go on there and see what they would have looked like back in the day, because that's
Exactly.
the
Yeah,
standard they compare
definitely.
them to. But obviously, the ones I tend to buy aren't quite like that. But yeah, it's funny all these ones with us around. So you had that ZR for a few months, and then did you
I had the ZR for a
move it
few
on?
months. I had the Metro for a few months. I actually had it for about half a year, I think. But when the Metro failed and I knew that the ZR had to go because it was dying on me, I had no money left.
You bought two cars.
Yeah, I'd got given one car, I'd bought another one, and then I had nothing left to buy another. Albeit I would have gone for gotten someone to help me to find a decent one this time. I had nothing left, so I went to my local I was about to say MG Rover dealership. They were MG Rover originally, but my local MG dealership, yes, Maple Garage in East Yorkshire, very, very decent garage. And I thought, right, well, why don't I go for an MG3 on finance, not on HP, so I can actually class it as my own rather than PCP. And the salesman said, "Oh, well, you were looking for one in red," and they had the perfect one. It wasn't leather. It was.
It's not a Style Luxen or Style Plus, because they use both names for the one with leather. Style Lux, Style Plus. It's a Style.
Style, yeah.
Yeah.
So and it had everything. It had Bluetooth parking sensors. It's got just the works, and it was in that red, and it was built at Longbridge. Well, assembled at Longbridge. So that was the one thing I wanted.
Yeah. So it's very similar to the one we had, because ours is just a Style as well. It just is black. And the ones made before 2016, which the ones posted about called the start stop cars, I think, and most of the MG3 people call them that. The pre start stop ones are very cheap now, actually, as well. They're fantastic value cars, and they're really not as unreliable and bad as people tell you that they are. I mean, we had ours 3 years, and actually the main thing that failed on ours was the fuel pump, which was a pretty stupid failure at 4 years old, to have a fuel pump go, but it did, and it wasn't too expensive to replace. A genuine one was £100, and then £100 labour at one of the local garages to put it in, but it was just the car was totally stranded. You couldn't use it. That was just the only issue. Apart from that, it was okay. There are a number of sort of little annoying flaws of an MG3, particularly the earlier ones, but you get used to them. And the handling and steering of one of those is sublime, isn't it? Absolutely sublime. But yours isn't totally standard, is it?
No, I mean, just to quickly add on to your points, I mean, I've only ever had one huge problem go wrong on it, and it was during the warranty period. Essentially, it's quite a funny story actually. I had a rattle under the bonnet, and I was thinking, what is it? What is it? I took it in, they couldn't find anything. Rattle went away, and then it came back. Took it in again, couldn't find anything, and then I took it in again, and they said, right, we've found bad compression in one of the cylinders.
Whoa.
So they stripped the head down, which is very uncommon for one of these. They're fairly well built cars. I thought it'd be the timing chain or something.
Never heard of that. I mean, yeah, the timing chain is something happens, radiator something happens, and for some reason the clutch. Although our car did 60,000 miles on the original clutch before we sold it, original front brakes as well. We did the pads hadn't even been changed when we actually built them out. But we knew that because they were ATE pads, and you can't buy them aftermarket, so they were original pads. So yeah, people always say, big cars are terrible and they're really cheaply made and all sorts of things. I mean, some bits you can see cost cutting, but actually the fundamental engineering of the cars ain't too bad. It's just all right.
Yeah, I mean, this compression problem, I don't know how bad it was because I never got a receipt for it, which might say something. It might just say that they were saying it to shut me up. I don't know. But when I got it back, there was the rattle again. Turned out it was the bonnet stoppers weren't adjusted properly. So the bonnet was rattling. So if I hadn't adjusted the bonnet stoppers, I wouldn't have found out if there was bad compression in the cylinders. So at least that's a positive. But no, mine isn't standard as such. It's I've done 40. I got it with 34,000 miles, and it's now on 78. So I've done 44,000 miles in it in 3 years. I do a lot less now. I've done a lot less since 2000, since like my first year. The first year I did about 30,000 in it.
Wow.
And then since then I've done a lot less.
Yeah.
It was just because of where I was working at the time and what I was doing in my own social life. I was doing a lot of miles with friends and family.
Yeah.
Yeah, so since I think it was about the beginning of last year, I just started to subtly modify it. I wanted to make it a bit more MG feel, a bit more sporty, a bit more fun, even though it is fun to drive, just a bit more responsive and
a little bit more power. Really, really, they should put the 1 litre turbo engine from the ZS automatic in it. They've just brought out a ZS manual now with that engine. I mean, I've been going on about this on absolutely years. I mean, the first MG3 review on the channel that we did was the second video on the channel. And I've said then that the car needs more power and it needs a 6-speed box. MG didn't listen to me, and they still haven't listened to me. Never mind, because the thing's been discontinued, I think, later this year. But it's one of these things. And I had a client recently who, she drove an MG3 and then drove, the Kia Rio used to be in the channel, and she liked the MG3, but she said this car's just got no power. It's just hasn't got enough power. And if you drive it, foot down everywhere, you hit the variable valve timing, and it's great. But I don't think everybody wants to drive like that all the time because you'll use get 20 miles per gallon or something out of it.
yeah.
So it does need a little bit more. The engine's a bit low on torque, and it needs a bit more of a. This engine note's not bad. The exhaust is okay, but a more of a sporty note wouldn't go amiss. And I know I've seen videos on your channel of this modification, and it sounds really good.
Yeah, I mean, modifications that I've done to mine, I added some MagnaCore Performance ignition leads. They help smooth it. The problem, I don't know whether you remember with yours, but especially with the earlier engines, you tend to get a juddering setting off from junctions and stuff, especially when it's cold. Now, a lot of people said, oh, that's driver error, like you're letting out the clutch too. And I was letting out the clutch as slowly as I could, or as quick, just to see if different clutch, letting out the clutch at different paces would change it, which it didn't. So I replaced the ignition leads and that completely wiped that out.
That's
it just
weird, isn't it? Weird.
It is very strange. But it added a bit of extra performance. I then did the air filter, so that's got a panel air filter. I don't like doing cones and all that sort of typical boy racery stuff, but the panel air filter helps give it just that little bit of extra oomph. And then to counteract that, I've also got the not counteract it, to finish that off. I've then got the exhaust system that I had custom made in August last year.
Yeah, the thing that I remember about the clutch, one of the things I would say on MG3, if you're used to most cars, the clutches are a bit weird. They are a little bit weird. They take a bit while to get used to. And also the very early, the early cars like yours and the one we had, they have this weird software thing where unless you're really, really smooth with the gear change for 30 seconds, it will blip the throttle for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody mention that before, and it's done my head in for years.
Yeah. If you're a good driver, like I know that you are, you can actually drive the car, so it doesn't do that. If you just very smooth with first a second, it's okay. And that's the thing people have noticed. Why it's there, because it is a software thing. It's something to do with anything else. It's a software thing. Why it's there, I don't know. The top start cars and the facelift ones don't do that. It's a really
ridiculous.
bizarre thing. I don't understand.
One of the reasons why I changed the HT, the ignition lead, because I thought that would cancel it, and it's so annoying on the way to work because you'll set off from a junction, you go, and then you'll put it into second, it goes, and it's like, oh, shut up, you stupid thing.
If you're really good with the gear change and the clutch, it doesn't do it. But you have to be a proper driver to do that. And MG3s, I think, have a single mass flywheel in them as well. So they're not like most of the cars that I drive these days with manual gearbox. I've had to have a dual mass flywheel in them, which is the pet hated Mr. Coleman. He can't stand the things. But proper drivers with single mass flywheels, you can actually drive nice and smoothly. It won't do it, but that's a very common thing that people say. It's not, I'd say, a problem. It is a choice that MG made, and obviously
it's an annoyance to say the least. It's stopped doing. I have to say, I took it out to go shopping, and I got that sick of being stuck indoors. I actually went and did the shopping for my parents the other day.
Of course.
And it did it for the first time in months. I've actually managed to get it to stop doing it, which obviously means I'm going on well as a driver in the last 4 years. But it did it for the first time, and it's just reminds you of how annoying it is. But it's slowly gotten out of doing it. So I don't know whether it's the car or me.
That's your driving. That's all it is. It's just you get used to it.
Yeah, but no, it's a fairly decent car. I mean,
great.
I've really enjoyed owning it. It's very reliable. It's comfortable to an extent. The suspension's very hard for a city car. I will say that, or at least it is on mine.
Yeah, but they are. Yeah, they are. It's again like a choice. It's like the hydraulic steering. They could have put electric steering in it like everyone else has, but they've deliberately, I think, left it so that it has the hydraulic steering with that kind of feel, which you just don't get in most other cars because they're all electric these days. And
I'm definitely glad they've done the hydraulic though.
Yeah. A lot of testers have said on MG3 the steering's really heavy. It's like it's not really heavy. Try driving a Maestro with no power steering. That's heavy. Try one of those. That's heavy. And you build your biceps up by doing that. It's not heavy. It's just we don't have cars like this anymore with hydraulic steering. So of course it feels a bit heavier because you're not used to driving the thing properly. You're not used to actually driving properly. And you're twiddling a little finger like this with an electric rack. So
exactly, it's silly on electric racks. My mother, who's now got a Ford Puma, she used to have a 2012 Ford Ka, so the more modern version.
Yeah,
and that had electric steering.
The 500 version.
500, the 500 underneath. Mm-hmm. And that was just, I drove it to work one day to valet it for her. And you could try, and you just do it, and it's wrong. It feels weird, really, really weird.
Yeah. The thing is as well about that is that obviously the current ZS, that's got 3-mode steering on it, and so you can make that. The steering's really too light anyway, even in the sport mode, which I get in the ZS. I put it on sport mode because I can't stand over light steering. But if you put that on comfort mode or city mode or whatever, it's ridiculous. There's absolutely no feel to the steering whatsoever. I mean, my Tanyon's got the same thing. It's got 3-mode steering on it. And I never have it in anything other than sport, but sport is still too light. It's so stupid.
It is ridiculous. I mean, yes, it's just It's one of the reasons why I prefer older cars over modern ones. I mean, I do quite like the features of the MG3, but as much as I've really gotten into the owners with the MG635 register on the MG Car Club, and I love being part of the MG Car Club.
Yeah.
As much as I really enjoy the MG3 as a car, I've never been a modern car person, and I had to buy it because I didn't have the money for the other bit. But even though that being said, I have enjoyed owning it.
Yeah,
but yeah,
it's probably, in terms of first cars for say £5,000, you can usually buy an MG3 for £5,000 now. That is a first car, I'd say, straight away number one recommendation, because
insurance is the best on them. It's
so
ridiculous
cheap.
for the size. The insurance is so cheap.
Yeah, it's Group 4. And also that they're very spacious cars in terms of the passenger space. They're bigger than, like, some small family cars in terms of the back sort of rear space and things. It's quite amazing, really, for those.
Yeah.
And they have, they are very well equipped for the price, particularly the new ones, which have things like, bursting camera and that sort of thing. They're very, very good, and the Apple CarPlay and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But obviously, what you really want, and this is, something that the viewers, if they watch Maverick Motors, will see, is that you're very much focused upon kind of these kind of 90s sort of Rovers type thing. And obviously, that's a subject very clear to my heart. Can you just explain to the viewers what the Jetberg Rover 820 actually is? Because it's well known in certain circles. I had heard of it before it appeared on your channel, but can you just explain, what that actually means and where the car came from?
Right. Well, the Jetberg Rover, essentially, I didn't know much about it particularly until Nick and Dan sort of presented it to me, and essentially, there's this garage called Find a Car Easily, is its trading name, also known as Jetberg Limited. That's the company name that it was under, and it's a very well-known sort of 1950s, 60s sort of outdoor car dealership that's been abandoned since 2002, and it's become quite well known through classic car circles and just the motor industry in general and urban explorers, because it was full of old abandoned vehicles. And one of them, essentially, it whittled down to about 3 of them. One of them being this Rover, a Austin Maestro, and a Vauxhall Cavalier. The Maestro and the Cavalier are still there and for sale.
Wow, are they still there?
They are still there, but they are
Gosh.
a bit too pricey. We were going to try and get hold of the Maestro as well, but now that we've pretty much done the Jetberg Rover, but he wants too much for what both of them's worth, which is, a bit sad. But anyway, so back to the Jetberg Rover. It been sat there for a while, and then it was uncovered by one chap, sold on to another, and then sold on to Dan, who now owns it. And Dan essentially said to Nick and I've got this Rover 820. Do you fancy coming and helping me restore it? And you can film it because it's, this really well-known one. And instantly it twigged in my head. Nick showed me this picture. He said, "Oh, I've got a mate who's got this car." And I looked at it and I said, "I know exactly where that's from. And that is that car from that dealership, isn't it?" And yeah, so it's been a really big journey so far. I mean, we've had a bit of a gap because of this third lockdown, which is a bit annoying. And I am trying to piece together a video over today and tomorrow so that we can actually carry on the story of it. But it started off slow and quick at parts. We managed to get it started quite quickly. It had turned over in a previous owner's possession, as far as I know. And then we've done things like, simple service, sparks, that sort of thing. And really, it's just been trying to piece it back together as a car. So Dan, he's Rover 800 bonkers. He's got an 827 SLI. He's got a Vitesse. He's had not hundreds of them, but he's had a damn few of them. And so he's got parts galore, and he's essentially pieced back together things like the windows. He's found a windscreen and got the windscreen aperture welded. And then we had a bit of a setback with the brakes, which was the previous episode.
Mhm.
And since then, we've got the brakes done last week. The windscreen's been done. We've got the steel wheels back on it. Or, well, steel wheels on it. It had alloys on it originally, but it's got steel wheels with trims on. And it's pretty much almost ready for an MOT now. It's getting there. So yeah, it's a great project.
Can you just go over the spec of the car? I know it's an 820, so is that the M series engine? It's before the T series. Is that
Yes,
M series?
it's the 820 M series, and it's an SI, so it's sort of mid-range spec.
Yeah, it's not like Ian Seabrook's one that was I think it was an 820e, the one he had. This was the carburettor version of I think it was an O series, actually, the one that he had. And Ian Seabrook being Ian Seabrook, every time he buys a car, it's always the worst version possible of the car, which he completely understands and completely knows about it. It's like the 75 that he has, but moving on, having driven a lot of ZTs that are very shortly rated that, I just, when speaking to Mr. Coleman and his uncle who's MOT'd like 400 or 500 of those things, he always buys, like, because it's the thing you'd never do but could secretly want to. You want to buy something like that, but you can't afford it. But that someone in your life, like your lady wife or something, would never let you do it. His lady friend completely does let him do it, and it's just a vicarious watch, and he gets loads of views from it. So it's all credit to Ian Seabrook.
I have a lot of respect for Mr. Seabrook. It's utterly fantastic. I mean, I've been watching him since, God, it had been about 9 years ago. He did a video on his Austin Maestro diesel van, and that's the first video I remember watching of his. And so 9 years ago, I would have been 12. So I've been watching him since then, and I have the utmost respect for what he does. I think it's fantastic how he's had all sorts, and that Rover 820e was brilliant. And it's quite funny you mention it, actually. Just before lockdown, Dan and I went to a local scrapyard near me, and we were stripping these. It's an absolute mecca of a scrapyard. You'd love it. There's rows and rows of modern cars, and then right at the back in the hedges, there's Rover 800s, Austin Cambridges, Morris Minors, Austin Allegros. There's a Princess, a P6, full of it, and it's fantastic in there. But there's these two 800s, on one on top of the other, and one of them being a Rover 820e. And we're 95% sure, because we found some receipts in it. Dan is 95% sure that it's the car he test drove about 20 years ago, which was really weird. I went to meet him, and he was all sort of a bit bewildered, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And he said, "I think I've test driven this car about 20 years ago," because it's got receipts from where it was and all that sort of stuff. And it was, but that was the 820e with the O series in it.
Yeah. This is a very late XX, isn't it? It's an XX, so it's about 1990, isn't it? So it's a couple of years before the R17 facelift.
Yes. So are we on about Jetberg?
Yeah, Jetberg.
Yeah. So H630YRA. So I think something seems to ring a bell. November 1990, but I might be wrong.
That sounds about right. Yeah, that's about right.
But it's a late XX. I think R17 came in April 91, possibly.
I think it's a little.
It might have been later, because it was
a little bit later. Yeah, it's a bit later. I think Jeremy Clarkson.
91, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jeremy Clark's one of the first people to drive one, and the review of Top Gear's on on YouTube, obviously illegally, but it's there. And I think that's late 91, because it's a 92 model year, I think, the R17. So yeah, it's quite a late XX. Whereabouts was the Jetbo thing? Is it in I've named the place where this goes to. I think it's in Derbyshire somewhere, isn't it? Derbyshire.
Yes,
somewhere.
it's Castle Gresley.
Castle Gresley, yeah.
It's what we actually call it is Gresley. That's what we call the car outside of YouTube. It just
Yeah.
Jetberg is a bit Gresley just comes off the tongue a bit easier, but I think that's what we've just nicknamed it, being Yorkshireman.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was Castle Gresley. I think it's also called. There's another name. I think it's two villages that are very close to each other. But it's in Derbyshire, yeah. So our plan, we've got a bit of a plan going on that we're going to at least take the Jetberg Rover back to the garage when it's finished.
Gresley,
or as well as that, we're hoping to maybe get like a convoy of several 800s and, you know, take a few back, because we do know of some other cars that have also been taken from that garage and restored. I think one of them's been raced. You know, several of them have been saved, so it'd be nice to get a few of them back to the garage before it gets knocked down.
The funny thing about that place, the layout is not like a normal garage. It's like the cars are in little cages all the way along.
It's like a car zoo.
It's weird. It's like it's on the side of a hill, so it's on quite a main road from what I remember. It's a main road that's kind of like this down here, and the cars are on this side, but this way out. So the cars point this way, and they all go down like this in individual little cages. And
yeah, that's the one.
It looks like it's been abandoned for years, but as you say, the owner, he knows what's there. It's not like he's unaware of it, and he still thinks of it as a functioning dealership. I mean, why on earth it's called Find a Car Easily? That sounds like you're going to get yourself an Audi A3 saloon or something from it, or a Vauxhall Mokka X or something like that. Not a Maestro and a Cavalier and a Rover 820. It's the most bizarre thing I think I've ever seen in terms of automotive archaeology.
It is very strange. I mean, I think Find a Car Easily was the name of it right up until it stopped trading officially. Not officially, but trading in the open every day, that sort of thing, back in 2002. But he does still have a placard out front there with a phone number on, and you can ring that now, and usually he'll answer. And you can try and haggle, but he's supposedly he wants a bit too much for him. But essentially, once he gets rid of it, it's getting turned into houses.
They've been sitting there 20 years, haven't they? The Cavalier and the Maestro. They've been there 20 years. I mean,
plus 20 years plus. Next year.
It's silly, isn't it? I just want to touch upon one final thing. I didn't realize we'll have to stop at some point. I think we've been enjoying ourselves. I don't know if the viewers have, but that's just the way that it goes on this channel. You've come across a couple of our rates in your life. I mean, I've had a couple myself, as you know. What one of them I think I had was very similar in specification to one of the ones that you had. But one of them I think didn't work out for you, did it? Was it the white one didn't work out?
Yeah, I've only ever had the white one. I've always looked at several R8s. I've really enjoyed the design of them. I think for me, it's always seemed like I've always wanted a Rover 800 ever since I met Nick at a owners club meet that I used to run. I wanted his car because it was an ex-museum car, but I couldn't afford it. And at that same meet, there was another friend of mine, Liam, and he had this 94 reg L-Reg 216 SLI automatic in white, and I bought it for £200 off him. And I looked after it for about half a year, maybe even more actually. And I loved that car. I would visit it every weekend. I'd visit it on weeknights just to do little bits on it, because even though it was low mileage and it had a history book genuinely that thick, full of all the manuals, all the receipts. It was owned by a old chap, so it was a bit parking dented. The rear spoiler was held on with bathroom sealant, for instance. But eventually I just didn't have the money to have two cars, and because it costs so much to get rid of finance, I had to sell the MG3 instead of, sorry, not the MG3. I had to sell the 200 instead of selling the MG3 to use the 200, which was a shame. And it's now dead, sadly. I sold it onto a couple, and they did it up, and it went straight through an MOT with just a CV to be done. And then she sold it on, and then someone else sold it on, and someone else sold it on, and then Liam messaged me, and have you seen this?
Gosh. Oh no.
Yeah.
I remember. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So there was this red 200 with the same plate, and thinking someone's changed the plates on the car. And then it clicked in my head, oh no, someone's painted it with a paintbrush or a rattle can, and they've not masked it off, and I mean, myself and the chap who I sold it to were distraught. And it's like, why would you do that? But and it's a shame, because I'm pretty sure the dealership that was trying to sell it, because it was a Part X car, I've crushed it because it's no longer on DVLA's records. So
yeah.
which is a shame.
I had a similar thing with the first R8 I had, again, a 216 SLA automatic. Mine was a really late one. It was registered October 1996. So it can't have been made that year, because after
I was going to say it's 95 they stopped making them, wasn't it?
I mean, you can look up the plate on to check it. It's a P41 VFH. So it's completely, 31st October 96 it was registered. And it's not even like a 214 SEI, which was the sort of run out model. Well, they made them for quite a long time, actually, the SEIs. But I bought it from a sort of bomb site dealership in Uxbridge in about 2015. And what I didn't realize at the time was it was a write-off. And every time I drove it, the roof would sort of rattle a little bit. And I think what had happened is something had fallen on the roof. I don't think the car had been upside down. I think something fell on the roof, and the roof was a different shape from the rest of the car. So
shape to the fittings in the car, yeah.
Something had fallen on the roof, and I think the headlining was sagging a little bit at the back, because they all do that. So headlining always sags on.
Yeah, Rovers headlining.
R8 HHR 600s, whatever. And that's why when he set off it, I think it was vibration, because I think someone had sort of gone in it, the thing had fallen on it and it damaged the paint a bit. So they got in and sort of pushed it out with the feet, which you can do. I mean, Mr. Coleman's done that a few times with his banger cars. You can just get in and push it out, and then I think they just quickly masked it up. But yeah, the rear spoilers are a real problem on those late R8s, because mine was rubbish as well. You're really hard to close the boot, because you sort of push down the spoiler, it would just pop back up. And the spoiler actually was an aftermarket one, because I think the original one had sort of broken. So they put this aftermarket one, which really, unfortunately, damaged the look of the car, because it was night fire red, which I know is a sort of really popular color on them. And from the front, it looked brilliant. The paint, the lacquer peel wasn't too bad. Obviously, I think the roof was quite bad, so they just, painted it the wrong color or something. And problem is that again, car had service history, cam belt being done, that kind of thing. But the car was a Cat D, and I didn't realize it because I didn't do a data check, because I'm an idiot. This is before, of course, I source cars for people. Nowadays, I say to you, unless you look at Auto Trader, which it actually gives you, the basic 5 elements, whether the car's been written off, stolen, that kind of thing, and you can check for that quite easily. Or if it's on another site, you can just do a data check through RAC or whatever. Do a data check, cost £5. It's worth it, isn't it, for the older cars to do that. I found out when I traded it in for the MG3, because the list of advisories on the MOT was quite long, and then he said, oh, it needs this and that and that, and the rear suspension bushes need to do, which is a classic thing on an R8, suspension bushes. And I just wanted a more modern car for my lady wife to learn to drive in. And I went to the MG dealership, and they had this MG3, and they offered me 200 quid because it was a write-off, and I was really annoyed about that, because I still miss that car. I really miss it. And one day I will have another R8. I'd probably a Tourer, because I like the Tourers. Probably in dark green, because that's just what I like.
Yeah.
But it's just funny that you sort of two bizarre stories. I think they probably sent that down the auction. And if you look at the MOT history, the last MOT I had done on it is the last MOT the car ever had. So I don't know if they crushed it or they sent it to the auction or whatever. But it's just a shame, cars like that people sort of mess around with them by making really bad repairs on them, or modifying them to just stupid extent, and they end up in the bin because they're being mistreated. I don't like that really.
No, I think it's quite past it for trends of cars, really. I think obviously any car's going to go through stages like that at some point, but I think with modern cars, it's started to shift away from that now, because the majority of them aren't bangers. You know, the majority of them, even the cheap ones like Dacias and MGs, are still relatively really well built. So
Yeah, pretty good
a
cars.
lot of people want them.
Yeah, it is. That's right, isn't it?
Hmm.
I think we're going to have to sort of end, because I'm just looking at the time, and it's been a bit longer than I imagined. I do apologise for that. So, how can people get? You mentioned Drive Tribe. It's not something I'm particularly familiar with myself, but and I know some people are kind of really into it. How do people find you on Drive Tribe?
Well, similar to how you'd find me or you on YouTube.
Oh yeah,
So Drive Tribe works. Originally, it was working like a car-based Facebook,
yeah.
but they've sort of gone on to their own different, not own different, but they've sort of gone into their own niche now, and it works a lot better than it did when it first started. But on Drive Tribe, there is a little search button, and you can either search for Maverick Motors, or you can search for my name, Josh Langstaff. The majority of the stuff I do on Drive Tribe, I have a profile, and I'll post it in my group, Maverick Motors. So that's how it works on there.
Okay, and of course your YouTube channel is Maverick Motors, which I will link to in the description below. But I don't even know why I need to say that, because I think most people will expect that. So obviously, once this whole unpleasant business is over, it's something that we organised. I don't know how long ago it was. For me to come and drive whatever on earth you ended up with, or whether it's still the MG3 at that time or it's something else. Because I gather you have it.
Well, fingers crossed.
Something else.
Fingers crossed. Said something else might be. I've been trust Dan, which is a dangerous thing to do. I've been trust Dan to find me a car, and I know he's going to view one in the next week or so, possibly if all the weather holds up. So fingers crossed within the next month, 2 months, and we're saying between now and April-ish, I should have a new motor.
Oh wow, brilliant.
Should.
I mean, I'm gonna have to get myself sort of up there before that kind of happens, because I really want to drive an MG3 with a bit more power. I really, really want to do that. And, when I realised initially that you actually had a modified one, but there are people who modified them, particularly the earlier ones that are out of warranty. When they brought in the 7-year warranty a couple of years ago, that sort of precludes too many people from doing modifications on them. But because yours it's got a bit more power, and it looks great. You obviously really looked after it, and actually it's quite a high mileage one for the year of the car. And again, people say absolute rubbish and everything like that, and it's just not true, because they're not. They have their problems. People do,
much like with any car.
Yeah, radiators can be an issue. Fuel pump, like in us, clutches sometimes can go on them, and the timing chains. But a lot of the things are these. If you look after the car properly, you don't thrash it everywhere, and you change the oil everywhere. You don't necessarily have a problem. We never had a problem with the timing chain on ours, and we just managed to service it properly. That's one of these things, and I think we can take it from everything that we've said, that maybe you should just look over your car very carefully before you buy it. Otherwise, you might end up with a few problems.
Yes, definitely. That's why I'm so sort of nervous for Dan getting me a car, because he keeps saying, "Oh, I'm going to surprise you. I'm not going to send you any pictures." I'm like, "What? No." So he was only joking, thank goodness. But from having a year of buying terrible cars, not terrible, but not very well looked after cars, and then having 3 years of reliable motoring, and then going back to buying a second-hand car is like really nervous for me. I'm excited. I'm really looking at, fingers crossed, I'm hoping to get a fairly nice Rover 800. And
and our R17 one, we must point out.
Yes. And I'm really excited to getting one. I've always wanted, no matter what 800 it is, I've always wanted one. And I've always wanted, recently I now want an automatic for work, because I do a lot of miles. And and I do a lot of long journeys and then city driving, so to help with that. And as well as that, I just would love an 800, a big barge car, something a bit comfortable. But with Dan saying, "Oh, surprise you," it's like, it's a bit okay. I'm a bit nervous, but all right.
Yeah.
I trust him though. He'll do much better job than I could do. So much better, and I know he'll do it up for me and make it right.
It's so funny when you get someone, obviously because, my job is finding cars to people and I actually get paid for it. It's funny when you actually are looking for a car for, in my case, a client or someone else. You tend to do a better job of it than you actually would do for yourself, and you kind of, you let yourself get into all kinds of funny scrapes and stuff. But with someone else, you actually do tend to do a better job. And one thing I just would say about driving away in MG3, they're surprisingly comfortable on long journeys. I used to do 4.5 hours without a break, and then going up to see my father-in-law in the northwest, and we actually did that. My lady wife's done that as well. She's driven it for for that amount of time, and they're actually surprisingly comfortable for a small little cheap car on a motor. Particularly when you've got this style that has the cruise control in it, which is obviously the one that you want.
I mean, I've done tons of miles in mine. I drove to London in it 2 years ago, twice. I've also done the most recent long journey within COVID times. I went to the MG Car Club Social, which is at Gaydon. And Gaydon's a fairly long journey from East Yorkshire. So that took me, I drove down at 3 o'clock in the morning to go and meet with a friend beforehand.
Wow, crazy.
And I was absolutely fine. Just shoved the cruise control on, blast my tunes up, and I absolutely loved that journey. Actually, I'd happily do that again.
It's just funny, because for some reason I'm quite sensitive to cars that aren't very comfortable. As I said, with the 25s and R3s and ZRs and everything like that, and for whatever reason, I don't have that problem in MG3 at all. No, it's not like that. So it must therefore be a very comfortable car. But we're now looking at a different stage now with an R17 800.
Yes, proper luxury.
A different world of luxury.
This is funny as well. And going back to our earlier conversation on insurance, my MG3 cost me roughly in the region of £120 a month, right? That's a 1.5 city hatchback with a 21 coming on 22-year-old with one crash on their history, right?
It's group 4 insurance. I mean, that's one of the lowest groups out there.
Right. So an 800 with which is about group 11, if I'm right, group 11 to 16, something like that.
I don't know. We're looking obviously the 2 litre rather than the KB6 ones, which obviously we're avoiding for obvious reasons.
I have to say, both of them, both the KB6, the 2.7 Honda, and the 2 litre M series, and the T series for that fact,
T series,
have all come around the same region in price, and so my yearly total on insurance on the MG3 is about £1,200-300.
It's honestly pretty good for somebody who is your age. That's really not bad.
Yeah. So this is why I really want an 800 though, right? Okay. Insurance on an 800 for a year. If I pay it outright, it's on an 820, and for all of them, really, it's in roughly this region, £650 to £750. Get in. I can't wait, and that's same everything, same mileage. It's ridiculous.
We have to bear in mind, viewers, here that we are not talking about a classic policy. Obviously, classic policy that'll be even less, but we're talking about normal car insurance for somebody who's a professional man.
A yuppie, if you would.
I know, because you've now got your Rover 800 costume on. Which you're going to have to wear every time you drive.
I tell you what, I need to get a turtleneck. I need to get if I get an R17, especially if it's in beige or champagne, I need to get a turtleneck, a red jacket, and start going like that around everywhere or something before everybody else starts spray painting on it.
Exactly. Just hoping nobody spray paints your car. But yes, I think we are going to have to finish here. I don't know how long this video is. I might have to break this up into bits, because it's sort of it's been quite a long one, but it's been a very enjoyable experience. Please don't forget to subscribe to Maverick Motors on YouTube. Link is in the description below. Obviously, to Lloyd Vehicle Consulting. I'll put a link to the Drive Tribe. What do you call it? Drive Tribe page or channel on Drive Tribe? I'm not sure.
Drive Tribe. Soundful, but that's what they're called. Drive Tribes. It's essentially a group. where I post everything.
Okay, that's fine. We'll do that. So we might have a little chat with Mr. Langstaff at some point, if the viewers want to see it. They might do, they might not. It's always a bit of hit and miss on my channel, this kind of thing. But thank you so much indeed, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you again for another one of these lovely interviews next week.